Yo te de, yo te de, ay, oh, yo te de. Yo te de, yo te de, ay, oh, yo te de. Yo te de, yo te de, ay, oh, yo te de. Yo te de, yo te de, ay, oh, yo te de. Happy Aries season. 'Tis the first day. Of course, it would be also on the equinox. What an interesting time to be alive. And what a hell of a time to be alive. What a powerful time to be alive. And something that I think Aries knows intimately well, but is also going to be asked to mitigate in so many ways. It's such an interesting time. But not just that. It is not Aries outright. If you've been here before, you know I think that Western astrology leads to insanity. And so, in my mathematical calculations and transliterations, we will abide by indigenous astrology. In which case, it is not just Aries and the ram and the horns, because there are many variations of the story, and I think many more variations that suggest a softer side, a more grounded side, a more integral side. And not just that, but so beyond the 12 sign Western astrology, that would calculate to something more like an internal vortex, hence reactivity, hence the rapidity, hence the sort of bursting out that so many can have around this season, overwatering of plants even. It is not just this all fire, no grounding, all rage, no thought process. It is extended into a 13 to 20 sign astrology, a portal point, very much so. I think right before the spring equinox is that sort of birthing portal of, you know, the amniotic fluid of Pisces into this newborn of Aries. And much like we are finding out that, like, the vibrations in the womb, in the amniotic fluid, are very much echoes and tones that commit to memory. That is very true of Pisces influences on Aries. It is not just the baby of the zodiac, it is how it's nurtured. And I think because we lose that connection, because that connection I think would technically be, you know, in Western astrology, 13 sign Ophiuchus, because it's a portal in between any sign and any cusp, that does not delineate properly mathematically. But in 20 sign astrology and indigenous astrology, be it Telegi, Turkey, or Toltec and Mexica astrology, Aries would then be the crocodile, or the wind, or would be the heron and the owl. And so, oh gosh, my baby hair is my horns today. And so with that, there's much more to say about how the fire is tempered, how the fire is directed, how the fire moves, and ultimately I think what it roots to. And so there's an incredible amount of impulsivity that we get in Aries with Western astrology that is sustained and claimed in antidote within indigenous astrology. So it is not just fire, but it is the water that it heats and that carries it, which is exactly like I said with the fluid of the womb in Pisces, like Vesica Pisces birthing this portal, birthing through this portal, this new idea, which is why it's such a potent time astrologically, which is why people rush to manifest and claim new. But perhaps that is an archaic Aries understanding as well. It is not just about wants and, again, misdirected desires. It is the source of the heat and the ways in which that rises. And so with that, consider not just Mars that rules it, not just its proclivity to penetrate a room, but its emanation. And Mars is honor to Venus, because indigenous astrologies, or astrologies beyond Western astrology really, do account more for Venus in its cycles, because they are very integral, and it is much like a second sun. So when we attribute Aries only to the sun, we burn ourselves out. But when we remember that there is in fact a counterpart to this sun, we're able to expand in thought and throughout. And that is perhaps a lot to do with like the narcissism of the world that thinks, you know, we are the only conscious and intelligent beings in the universe, or that we, you know, the universe revolves around us in some way, shape, or form. And that is not the case. In fact, there are many more suns and many more stars that will go supernova, if you notice. And so we're going to read through a little bit of this and what the heron and the owl would mean. And in my own expansions of the crocodile and the whirlwind, I guess before we get into that, consider, you know, obviously there's factors of aggression, and there's factors of amygdala and rage and, you know, primal desire that people think is the root of Aries. And in reality, that's a short understanding of consciousness that falls short of the brainstem, that rests in the binary of pain and pleasure rather than in the nuances of experience, or the perspective of, or the ways in which we can regulate or directly send messages to the brain, to the brainstem, to the nervous system, beyond just understandings of pleasure and pain. That is very archaic, and here we do ancestral, not archaic. Gosh, in so many ways too, our understandings of primal or primal nature or primal consciousness are really just excusatory of states of aggression. Much in the way that I think like Western psychology has really done a number on itself to excuse narcissistic behavior, that many are now coming to find is very in line with white supremacy, and that perhaps a better way of saying it is white narcissism. And what I would say is even better way of saying it is a assimilated and affluent narcissism. Have you assimilated into the system? You know, perhaps that's the language that we ultimately ought to take on, rather than still maneuvering within division. Like there's a whole new system of being able to, there's a whole new system that we can apply to everything to be able to actually root ourselves or uproot ourselves out of it. And if we too intend to abolish systems, then the language around it is something to consider. I think Aries and our understandings of it very much function within the binary, within a fricative nature of this or that, good or evil or da 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 da. When there's so much space in between, be it, you know, a rooting point at azimuth in the shadow, or a projection point of light, like very literally, like a projector of light, like, what is it, Socrates' cave or something, Plato's cave, one of them. And so when we consider the crocodile, like, yes, there's been a lot of studies on its amygdala and its capacity for rage. Interestingly enough, crocodiles have developed more of a taste, of an affinity for human flesh, because wars across the world have used the crocodile populations to get rid of bodies, or to torture captives by feeding them to crocodiles. And that's happened for as long as we can remember, maybe even longer, considering documentations and their fallacies. But it is something that still happens currently. And so there's, certain populations that see more crocodile attacks because they're fiending for human flesh now that they've been exposed to it. Likewise, I'm sure there's environments where they're maybe more docile, because they're so surrounded by people. But I don't know, I don't live in Florida, so I can't really say that for sure. Um, but not just that. There was another video that I did recently that talks about the idea of evolutionary progressions, and the Flintstone, I believe it was the last one, and the Flintstone, and sharp edges of rocks, essentially being a point in which cavemen evolved to be able to eat meat. And I wonder if that was a step in forward progression or a step in a negatory progression, and the fiending for flesh that we still have to this day, that we still very much fail to fully understand. Like, what if at that point in history, instead of, ooh, sharp edge, I can kill something with it, we instead, humanity at its root was instead able to consider faster harvesting or faster digging. And obviously at some point those things happened, yes. But I don't know, the more that I learn about like protein content in, peas and in plants and in mushrooms, was it really an evolutionary advancement to begin eating flesh? To begin eating large amounts of flesh, or higher quote-unquote protein flesh, because it's not higher protein technically or literally, statistically, nutritionally. So that's my gripe with understandings of evolution, understandings of consciousness, understandings of Aries, really, the head of all things, and a head far too big for its britches because it lacks grounding. But not just that, if you consider one of the major, I guess, attacking styles of crocodiles, then they do this thing where they'll like lock and they'll spin. It's, God, what the hell is it called? Death roll. That they death roll. And it's like, it'll rip your limbs off, or it, tears open prey. To a large degree, and this is, again, very much something that I think is common within Western Aries understanding, is, yes, that capacity to tear other people open, to tear into anything. There's very much a defensive quality to it. However, what if we were to tear ourselves open? What if we were to harness that kind of momentum towards something greater, and with awareness of its impact? The crocodile ultimately has awareness of its impact. This is, prime way of feasting. Its prime way of feeding. But as far as us and our energies go, we need not burst open others before we burst open ourselves. And we need to, I think, ultimately hone in on that, I guess, central quality, that aerodynamic central line that allows for that kind of momentum to be able to drive through whatever it is that we choose, and with great awareness of its impact. Embrace the crocodile. Embrace its very ancient roots, because it was like a dinosaur or something, right? It's been around for a long time. Not to be confused with the alligator. You can tell by its nose. Which is interesting too, because the Western Aries very much has its nose in the air, and it's not a good way to see. A crocodile would have these eyes on the side. It doesn't keep its nose like in the air. It's very much like level with it, if not down, which is why the tip of the nose can come up under the water, or from over the water. Come up from under the water. That's what I mean. And has a clearer line of sight because of that. That's not to say humbled. That is to say direct. That's not to say nose in the air, pomp and circumstance, and not humbled as in eyes to the ground, but very much placing focus into higher thinking, placing focus into direction, placing focus into the mind's eye. And with that, you very much have wind already, like inert in it, because of that death roll. And so the current that follows is very much the reward. And I think too often we get stuck in these, very tangible terms, very concreted terms, which is interesting because the wind also innervates in the opposite side of astrology with, I want to say, with Capricorn, of course, with Capricorn, which does beckons this grounding element as well, like the ways in which we protect the earth from fire, the ways in which we, place something down before we burn it, or the ways in which we control burn to be able to feed the earth ash and coal and the sterilization properties of fire. So again, the properties of not just the outright, not just the bite down, not just the bark, not just the bite, but the relationship between the two and the meaning behind the two. Like so many people have pets that, bark, 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 and they're like, I don't know what the fuck they want. It doesn't matter, it's all the same. And it's not. And it's not, but also, that's where we lose the relationship between those things, is when we assume that it's all the same. And I do think Aries can have quite an affinity for assumption. With that being said, the wind carries current and messages. And much like it comes from Pisces and like fluid and like cellular DNA, really, mitochondrial DNA, the memory in water, the hydrogen bonds, is then maybe evaporated, transmuted in the flame, rather than more like gasoline on the flame. And that allows for smoke to carry, for smoke to pass, for spirits to pass, for motion forward, for cleansing of the air, for cleansing of the earth, much in the ways that we smudge in so many ways, shapes, and forms. So, that's my thoughts. But we're going to see somebody else's thoughts. The owl. Uguku is south. Interesting, considering Aries is such a northern direction in most of our minds. But it'd be southern fire, and eastern water carries. So this being south is a veritable social butterfly, warm, extroverted, gregarious, sexually mature. Gosh, I wish that was true. Defined by white, jasper, fire, evening primrose, and juniper berries. In the sky, the owl is Arcturus, the brightest star in the constellation Boats. The Cherokee Bear constellation includes Big Dipper plus 4 stars in Boats constellation. The bowl is the bear, followed by 7 hunters. Robin, chickadee, and buzzard are the stars in the handle. Pigeon, blue jay, owl, and sparrow are in Boats. As above, so below. The owl is a hunter who stands for the wisdom and ability of all great hunters, the cunning of a fox, the tenacity of a bulldog, the strength of a bear. Owl is the title of the white or peace chief. Interesting, because that is very much not so what Western ideas of Aries are. Usually a medicine woman or man, But we also don't fucking understand war or peace, really. Now do we? This person has the responsibility of interpreting the visions and nightmares sent by Black Obsidian Butterfly, spirit of the dark maze of the human subconscious. Owl signs are people of long life and are likely to amass wealth somewhere along the way. I also find that to be antithetical to what we understand of Aries. I feel like most Aries go hard and with no break. They enjoy good health and a good physique, muscular, tall, hale, and hardy, vigorous and robust, free from disease. Owl signs are very talented and have an excellent store of knowledge. They are deep thinkers, hardened to life, realistic, practical, every inch, the wise old owl. They have more to offer the world, but they are strong-willed, have rigid convictions, and are not easily swayed by the arguments of others. Owl is inclined to be bold and authoritative, a person who must take control of situations using force if necessary. Of a serious nature, persons of the owl sign are grave, calm, discreet, eloquent, often gathering disciples around them. They may be teachers, fond of giving advice, as well as setting a good example. They shine in the area of dispensing advice to others. They have usually come up the hard way, faced many challenges, paid close attention to solutions, to problems, already know what works and what doesn't. This qualifies them to pass along the advantages of their own experience. They are able to analyze a situation and come up with a solution. The owl signs have good, down-to-earth business sense. They aspire to the role of boss or leader in some way, which is interesting and also inherently its own problem, because in the ways in which we see many of Aries, there's a lack of impulse control, and somebody who would make a good leader does not lack impulse control, which is why we are led in the ways that we are in the society that we live in now. They have what amounts to a compulsion to climb the corporate ladder. Go figure. As top dog, they like to control the big picture with under managers to carry out instructions from the top. Owl types are very status conscious. They're concerned with their own position in the social order. Interesting. There's so many levels of maturity, emotional maturity here, and emotional intelligence here, that I think Western astrology very much loses because it's so focused on typical educational intelligence or IQ, informational intelligence, that very much subordinates emotional intelligence. What a misdirect. What a misdirect. And with the idea of it being the baby, but also wanting to be a leader, but also not being able to control impulse. It's like, I'm sure all of us have experienced when you have a manager that's younger than you and that has less experience than you, and you're like, what? What? Owls are very status conscious, go figure. They are concerned with their own position in the social order. They seek authority and position. Now that sounds more like the Aries I know. Are acutely aware of their own importance at all times. This often leads to self-consciousness around those in a position to judge them. Insecurity. The Aries that shouts the loudest is the most insecure. They have high standards not only for their own actions but for those around them, often feeling it a duty to censure evil wherever they find it. What did I say about binary understandings of good and evil? The owl's head is capable of turning all the way around. This means they have eyes in the back and don't miss much. They have the capacity to not miss much, ideally. And exactly that, a greater perspective. A greater perspective, rather than just I see it, I want it, it's mine. The owl's head is capable of turning all the way around. This means they have eyes in the back and don't miss much. And they are recognizably insensitive to the frailties of their fellow men. That sounds familiar. Because they themselves fought tooth and talent for their place in the sun, they feel that others should do the same. Gosh, if that's not the American slogan of pick you up by your fucking bootstraps nonsense, as if the game isn't rigged or doesn't have an excessive amount of loopholes. They have a deep fear of rejection, insecurity, which can leave them at the mercy of over-aggressive, domineering personalities. Bam! That's the Aries I know. Females who have been subjected to father domination tend to become entangled in relationships with father figures. Strangely enough, although, gosh, yeah, I've seen that before too, actually. It's an attraction to masculinity as you've seen it before, to patterns of masculinity, which is often much more showy and bravado than it is in actually like holding, honoring, or protecting. Oftentimes is also more indicative of withholding of those things. Strangely enough, although there is much conflict with authority figures, owl signs feel strongly impelled to take over authority for themselves. And although they struggle mightily to remain a high man on the totem pole, not a few end up being victims. Yeah, exactly. Because there's a lack of emotional maturity or emotional regulation. You can't take control when you don't know what it means to lead or to guide. And that baby of the zodiac energy that just wants, doesn't know how to hold. And that's going to be something that we all have to kind of grapple with and learn through for all of the energies that are in Aries right now, because what is it? Saturn and Neptune conjunct, and then Eris and Chiron, which Chiron's been kicking ass in Aries for a hot minute now. And quite honestly, it's just people picking at scabs and picking at the same wounds, but like wondering why it's not healing. Like they're just letting it rot and bleed all over, and like picking at scabs and letting it bleed more, and not actually taking the time to integrate or to heal in integration, which would very literally be like skin cells recognizing other skin cells. Many female owl types become so browbeaten and insecure that they choose a husband who maintains the rigid structure of domination of the owl personality. Yikes. And so becomes the victim within it. Yikes. Seen it. Owl types are the personification of the struggle between superiority and inferiority. Again, with that binary, with that hierarchy, something that needs to be recognized and dismantled. Owl types are the personification of the struggle between superiority and inferiority. They're a mixture of differences, discrepancies, and imbalance. To control these conflicts, they insist on rules, laws that apply to everyone, regardless of status. Let the punishment fit the crime. What a tragic eye for an eye understanding that leads us all blind. They are strong on teaching the people that dereliction of duty, idleness, lying, theft, drunkenness, breaking the law brings on certain punishment. Often except to them, in many cases. This applies to the laws of both heaven and earth, which can be more accurately described as your perspective in the mind. Are you in hell on earth, or are you in heaven on earth? That is the portal of the spring equinox. Mixed in with this serious, fatalistic, arcane personality is a bright streak of comic relief. This sign has a great sense of humor that may come out at the most unexpected times. Although it is mostly sarcastic and cynical, it is sharp and keen and to the point. It's lonely at the top. These persons indeed must have much time alone, separate and solitary. Interesting. It's lonely when you think you're at the top, and really, you're probably more likely on the bottom. And in actuality, everybody's on the same plane. Because there are geometries throughout all of this that assist. And the baby of being, the baby or the horn of the zodiac is again these ideas of like a species supremacist consciousness. Where it's like our understandings of what is conscious and what isn't, what is worthy of listening to, what is not, what is worthy of consideration and what is not. And this fresh take often takes such a selfish route, thinking that it is the best, the biggest, the best, the baddest. When in reality it falls pretty fucking hard because of that. Aries, your own undoing is you yourself. And that is also with Chiron in Aries. And Sirius in Aries. Because much like I said about tending to wounds, Sirius in Aries is asking you, how do you nurture yourself? If it's lonely at the top, why didn't you bring anybody with you? If it's lonely in the top, then why is it so wrong to be on an equal plane? There's a lot of self-righteous energy. These persons indeed must have much time alone, separate, solitary. They retire to their own private mountaintop to meditate in order to establish wise counsel within themselves. This is difficult for the average person to understand. Yes, absolutely. And that would very much be understanding the chemistry of not just southern fire, but the eastern water, the water that it comes from, and the wind that carries it. You have all of these elements in you. That is a key in understanding, you know, I have this impulse, I have this reactivity. Where does it actually come from? From me. You know, it's not just because of this person or this instance. You know, this level of reactivity comes from a prior experience with it. You know, trauma bonding or trauma response. That isn't to say that it's not because it's incited through a traumatic experience or a familiarity to a traumatic experience, but that is to say, do you know where it comes from before you know where it's going? The owl is the mystic ferryman who guides earthlings on the return path to the stars. The length of the spinal column in your own body is the ferryman's staff, which points from the earth plane to the sky vault. Through meditation, you are able to tune into the universal consciousness and the perfect unfolding of the pattern and the meaning of the cosmos. It is the medium and the meaning behind it, and that is what drives it and directs it. One of the unpredictable fates and unusual occurrences, owl is a part of the wildness of the earth and the everlasting enigma of creation. Owl holds aloft a torch of white light that keeps the unfathomable darkness at bay. For fear of itself, no doubt. Owl types may be insensitive in their personal relationships. They have little patience with shortcomings of common herd, since they themselves have worked very hard to overcome obstacles. They feel that others should do the same. The worst thing that can happen to those of this sign is to lose face. What a status game. Fortunately, this rarely happens. Sometimes the roar of the crowd is so loud in your ears, you fail to hear the whispering of a butterfly's wings. The white light is within you. If you do not find it there, you will find it nowhere. If there is a fire to recognize it is the life in the fire, and again, the movement and motions of. It is living fire. It is free fire. And that takes awareness. You know, regulation and what have you isn't just about controlling it. And holding isn't about controlling it, like putting a butterfly in a plastic bag. It is about how soft you can be to hold these things. I think for as much as Aries postures for protection and dignity or what have you, there are softer ways to hold that which you want to protect. And then there are other ways through a thing without breaking yourself or the thing or, you know, the person or whatever, unless it's the system. We can break that. We can break that, but there's graceful ways to break. There's graceful ways to break it that require planning, that require thought, that require research, that require all the things that Aries like would rather not do. They would rather just be like, tell me what to do, I'm doing it. And this requires a little bit more introspection, because that's not the mode of a leader, that's the mode of a follower, which interestingly enough in Egyptian astrology, the sign of Aries is also regarded as a crocodile, and refers in a book that I read, translating Egyptian like spells, regards it as the son of sheep, which is again the baby. And yes, we have horns, but we have small horns. We have baby horns. Yes, we still have this element of the head in that, but it is a malleable head that requires direction. The son of sheep is a follower, and the crocodile isn't a follower per se, but is heavily studied because of its reactivity and aggression responses. So understanding these things doesn't mean channeling into that. That means understanding the antipodes and the mitigations of it, because crocodiles don't need anger management, do they? But they also have been fed flesh, and so that impulse, that craving remains or regains control. How do we gain control or gain a deeper awareness of self so that we are not controlled by impulse and reactivity? That is in finding your own light, or else you will find it nowhere. Don't let tyrants bully you. Listen to your inner voice. Insecurity can make you a victim of your own design. Yep, absolutely. I was just going to say that too. Don't let tyrants bully you, and don't become your own bully. And don't become the kind of bully that you have had to fight before. Oftentimes I see that in Aries personalities, is like they sort of act out a mirrored reflection of the kind of ways in which they've been subordinated or bullied in some way, shape, or form. And it comes from a place of insecurity. It comes from a place of wanting to be higher in the status ranks or what have you, to be respected. But respect doesn't come with pomp and circumstance. Respect comes often much more easily with a stillness and with a consistent vibration, not just the peaks and the impulses and the rushes and the highs that Aries so often craves. A gentle reminder, the Great Spirit runs the universe. It is neither your privilege nor your responsibility to do so. And yes, we are a fractal hologram experience of the universe. However, do you trust yourself? And do you trust the universe? And with all of this insecurity that comes up, I think often case that's not the case. And so we force our way through these things. We force our way into trust or situations that require us to trust ourselves, situations that require trust and honor in some way, without really having the tools for it. I think that's also very much a, like, chill, you're not in control of everything, and relax. Chill, you're not in control of everything, and take a breath or two. You don't have to force your way through. Damn. I have, like, polar antipodes in or like polar opposites in Aries, so that's all very interesting for me as well, and also very indicative of why I butt heads with some of those types. The heron, Goe, would be east. What did I say? Eastern water, return of light and new life, much like the spring. We awakening from the journey to the other world, much like Pisces in the depths. The cosmic egg drops the birth through the portal. Symbol would be heron or cosmic egg, green. Ooh, that's interesting too, because I've illustrated it with the egg in the crocodile, because crocodiles do lay eggs, and I feel like it was an interesting opposite of textures, of, I guess, the integrity of the symbol, and also kind of linking all scaled things in some way, shape, or form, because there is all of these triptych geometries that weave throughout all of these astrologies overlaid, be it Teleki, be it Toltec, be it Egyptian. Symbolized by green, mother of pearl, water, bird of paradise, flower, and honey locusts. In the sky, the Northern Cross is the tree of life. Interesting, because the tree of death, or the shadow, would have been more important for the owl beside the Milky Way River. And perched atop it is Goiskwe, the Cherokee heron spirit bird, comparable to the Egyptian phoenix. What did I say? Overlays, overlays. The star is now called Deneb. Myth has it that in a time of chaos, a beautiful young maiden or heron fell from the sky tree down, down, down into the primordial sea. Turtle came to the surface of the water and rescued her. Interesting. She nested there on Turtle's back and laid her cosmic egg. Every 5,000 years or so, the sun is captured by the Lord of Darkness. Just to go back for a second, the turtle very much often aligns with like Sagittarius or Capricorn, in which case there's a hearth element, a grounding element, an earth element, an element of safety, an element of home. A lot of the things that yes we understand in Capricorn is like energies of provision and energies of security. The turtle also very much emphasizes in many ways, but perhaps many more ways beyond just tangible, beyond just financial or fiscal or gain. Every 5,000 years or so, the sun is captured by the Lord of Darkness, or the evening star, or Venus. But heron spirit triumphs with the resurrection of the light, because the evening star also becomes the morning star as the seasons change. It is still Venus, bright in the sky, because of the ways in which that Venus oscillates around us. Heron is the sign of movement, of perpetual motion, of life everlasting from birth to rebirth. Venus is also important because Western astrology, yes, talks about Venus, but it is not one of the major trackings, whereas Aztec astrology, Toltec astrology, general Mexica astrology, other forms of indigenous astrology very much track Venus's cycles because they are so significant, because there's so many moments of conjunction that become very integral to the cycles. And I always say Western astrology leads you to the mind, the Aries, the horns, the ego, the posturing and the projection and the physical, literal overtaking rather than an undercurrent penetrating, much like Scorpio. And in that, Vedic astrology leads you to the heart. So what your Venus sign is in Western astrology is often what you'll find is your rising sign in Vedic astrology, because it directs you toward the heart's desires, toward, pure fire-rooted fire desires rather than just ideation, ego, status, secrecy, mind, intelligence, cyclical natures of insanity. And indigenous astrology will lead you to the soul. So there's these elements of as above and these elements of so below that are reminders for rooting, grounding, and projection. So it's like the piercing through all of these things. And so it's interesting that the heron spirit, in moving this Aries energy, is like, hey, don't forget about the heart. Hey, don't forget about what you truly desire, not just what you think you want. Don't forget about the importance of what you need, not just what you want. And have your needs been obfuscated by compulsion, by consumerism, by the many other misdirections that are placed in our face for sake of overstimulation? Let us not forget the heart. Hello, thank you for being here. Appreciate your presence and your awareness. Heron is the sign of movement, of perpetual motion, of life everlasting from birth to rebirth. It is the action of recycling, of salvaging all things of value from one world to another, from seed time to harvest and back again. much like we said earlier too, rise of spring, portals of the solstice, the ways in which, you know, so many are so quick to manifest. But it is the long game. It is very much the long game. And if we don't know how to regenerate or recycle our energy, that will be a problem. If we cannot salvage value from one world to another, or from old, you know, shadow side us to, you know, future us, from who we've been to who we are to who we want to be, then we struggle through those things, which is why people get so out of whack. Out of whack come these seasons, or get so viral, or get so compulsive, retaliatory, from seed time to harvest and back again. It is generations of regeneration. It is the realization that time and tide wait for no one. They go on forever. And so this element of control, of being the leader against elements that are never going to stop leading, is so interesting to me. This has come up before when I read the Star Chart of America, and in so many ways how applicable, right? And it makes me think of the times that it was turn of the century, and Chicago as a city had opted to reroute the river with explosives, and I'm pretty sure I'm remembering that right. They like blew up a dam and then created another one. Tons of explosives. Rerouted the river. And it was to dilute the toxicity in the river as was. Because there wasn't the sewage systems that we have now, obviously. But there was, you know, glues and bodies and bones and, you know, all kinds of bullshit. All kinds of toxins in the water. That at one point it was like a swampy, sickness-ridden place. And rather than clean the water, or find out a way to clean the water, all of the men in power thought it would be better to just reroute the river and, you know, take in more water and send all of the dirty water down. Which, what a Western Aries thing to do, with no awareness of how the wind carries, or very literally how water roots, and just this sort of need to stay, or think this foolish desire to stay ahead of Mother Nature, which has always kind of been, I think, a defining factor for the ways in which Chicago has dealt with so many of its disasters. In general, I think that can be expanded to multiple cities and to, you know, multiple disasters in major cities of the states of America. But I always find it really funny, just like how much men in power like think that they can beat Mother Nature, or think that they can outsmart nature, only to get bit in the fucking ass. Really, mind my language. Mind my language. Persons of this day sign have characteristics of looking to the future to save the planet for all of us. Gee, I'd fucking hope so. For our children and for our children's children. This is why 100% I think it's integral to understand the directions that these signs have, because it extends our ideas and our perspectives of what is a hierarchy. And, you know, we look at these things sort of in this linear fashion, and in reality there is always a momentum carrying. Like even your average Western astrology report is going to be sort of a mechanistic blueprint, but overlaying that within indigenous astrology translations, and then upon medicine wheel and directions, which are also noted in elements of the Alcir Codex, and like herbs for the seasons or what have you. The ways in which those directions carry give you a different perspective of like, okay, this is the, you know, idea, this is the, you know, this is the capacitor, this is the charge, this is what it illuminates, and this is how it regenerates. Very much like an Ohm circuit. That is, I think, a key element in how the medicine wheel functions, because all of these things are related to each other. It is much like a battery. It is one battery, but it does have a positive and negative side, and it does have, ambient current, and it does have a charge to it. This includes the environmentalists and those who protest cruelty to animals. Those of this sign are very likely to be found taking in stray animals or nursing a wounded bird. Oh god, every Aries person I know does that. Every freaking Aries person I know does that. I think a lot of people take in animals to care for something where they feel they've failed to care for themselves. And like, for sure, I was one of those people growing up too. I guess I just really haven't had an opportunity to be like, hey, little guy, you want to come home with me? However, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but I do think in a lot of ways we use these beings that we perceive to have less consciousness than us, even though, these fucking dogs with their buttons, and that one dog that had like an existential crisis looking into the mirror and like now is on fucking doggy Prozac, which there is no differentiation between doggy Prozac and human Prozac. It is just a lower dose. So funny how that happens. Like, oh, this medication is just for animals. What are you? Gosh, so silly. But yeah, the ways in which we, honestly, the ways in which we grieve, the ways in which we honestly expect or anticipate even, we, this is going to piss somebody off, I know. I think it's easy to say that animals teach us unconditional love, when in actuality, what I think humanity really enjoys is a love that they don't really have to work for. Like a love that they're kind of entitled to. Because you feed the dog, you house the dog, or the fish or the cat or whatever. It kind of has no choice but to put up with you. Cats obviously less so. I think cats are like humans that have been reincarnated, which is why they're like, don't fucking touch me right now. And I think we assume dogs are less intelligent because they trust us implicitly. And not implicitly, obviously, if you've had a rescue, that's not the case. But they trust us much more easily than humans trust other humans. And so rather than have to engage in the hard shadow work to build a human-to-human relationship or to deal with human emotions, we turn ourselves towards something else that needs us and that makes us feel valid because it needs us, and call that unconditional love, when in actuality it really is just a status of dependency. So consider that, and perhaps that makes you love your animals more. Perhaps that makes you love your pets more. Perhaps that makes you see them and their consciousness in a different light, because they know your behavior, like they learn so much about the ways in which you interact, and so many still fail to recognize the ways in which they're trying to communicate with us. It really isn't, it doesn't have to be much of a language barrier if you think about it. And if you're open to feeling, which Aries, I know that's hard, but open to feeling. And not just high or intense, but feeling nuance. Let's see, where was I before I got into my rant? They fight for the rights of the underdog at all levels. It is a labor of love. Not for a sparrow falleth. For not a sparrow falleth, and not even one tiny mustard seed should be wasted, lest the people go hungry on the morrow. There is never any doubt that people will come. It always has. It always will. Key lesson for Aries. It is a regenerative force. So it can carry and ought to carry and ought to give back in some way, shape, or form. Like if you consider, the ways in which we aspire for our children to be better than us, or next generation to be better than us, that is Aries' responsibility. And not to be better than everybody, but to give back. How do you give back to the next generation? That is what makes any generation better than the next one. There is never any doubt that tomorrow will come. It always has, it always will. This is the sign of a mentally alert, rational, progressive, but down-to-earth individual. One can only hope. Open-minded and future-oriented. Oh gosh, I wish more Aries were open-minded than future-oriented, yet hide-bound and opinionated, surrounded by controversy. These persons have a genuinely optimistic outlook. They laugh easily and have a great sense of humor. They enjoy the camaraderie of give and take without a chip on the shoulder. Gosh, I'm manifesting this kind of Aries in the world. If they lose a round, they just set a stubborn jaw and refuse to play anymore. Not that good. In fact, they may never bother to talk to you again. Definitely not that good. Well, would I mind? They're not the sort who telephones you to tell you how cool they've grown. They rarely threaten. Not in my experience. However, since they usually end up rich, prosperous, and powerful, they are more likely to cancel your Christmas bonus. What a bitch. Sorry. Persons of this sign hold the magic of ministry, medicine, marketing, and matchmaking. Interesting. Marketing is just manipulation, really. Matchmaking is like pattern recognition, maybe. Although in my experience, it's not so much pattern recognition as much as it is like frequency awareness. Like, what are you putting out? Not that I'm like particularly a matchmaker, but some might say that I'm pretty good at that. And marketing, the more anybody ever tells me about it, the more I learn about it. It's just subconscious manipulation. Heron signs have a great faith in the potential of the human soul. They believe that the world proceeds according to divine plan and that sensible and logical solutions should be found for every problem. Interesting, because it sounds a lot like they think they know best, which is why so many of these organized religions are modes of control, which I wanted to say with ministry is modes of control, but it's mental control. And for as much as, Christianity and Judaism and Islam have these ideas of like good and evil and God and devil, they really are rooted in a mode of control that distorts understandings, and it makes perfect sense that it comes up here in Aries, that all of this is coming up here in Aries, because they are, in fact, the evil themselves. Like, Christianity is all Jesus and God. But the ways in which we see Christianity enacted is of the same evil that they purport. So it is the very horns that they tell you to fear. There's a lot of elements of self-fear in this, actually. How interesting. Which embraces both the masculine mantra of and the feminine mantra of Ma. Heron signs have a great faith in the potential of the human soul. They believe that the world proceeds... I already read that. Their strength comes from the power of their own convictions. Interesting. How many times, if you're not new here, how many times have we talked about conviction over confidence? Or conviction instead of confidence? And so much of Western Aries is just about this empty, vapid confidence that has no roots to it, that has no real drive to it. And conviction is that difference. Conviction is not when you know what you want, it's know why you want. They do well as pastor of a church or a minister of religious education, particularly working with youth, coaching the ball team, for instance. The momentum of motion in this sign includes the rocking motion, which, like cradle rocking, soothes and relaxes and lulls anyone to sleep. Like the proper baby, be lulled. Learn to lull yourself. Again, that series in Aries. How do you nurture yourself? What is that relationship like with your internal world, with your nurturing? That's what Aries needs in a plethora, quite honestly. In a gentle parenting kind of way. In the kind of gentle parenting that does not enable. The momentum of this motion in this sign includes the rocking motion, like the da-da-da-da. This person has healing hands, and even when she's not touching a living entity, animal, vegetable, or mineral, can create peace of mind, mental, and physical balance. That's a mode of confidence, really. I think Aries often thinks they have to break through something when in actuality your hands can be healing instead. Healing crystals literally come alive under their hands. Oh. A rock and a rock. Between a rock and a hard place, do you find great ease? They talk to plants, herbs will work for them. A career in alternative medicine could be quite successful for Heron types. Person of this sign could also be a super sales representative. Selling ice boxes, selling ice boxes to Inuit or neckties to South Sea Islanders, or ideas to the masses on a grand scale, like politicians. Yikes. What did I say? Marketing and manipulation. Unshakable belief in one's product makes a good sales pitch. That is conviction. To act as a negotiator is a natural for this sign. The ability, oh gosh, I wish. Again, manifesting that kind of fucking Aries. The ability to see a situation from all sides makes it possible for Heron to point up a profit for all participants. The ability to see the situation from all sides to make it regenerative for all participants. That's also characteristic of the owl. Remember, perspective and action. To see a need in one place and fill it with a service from another is the kind of cooperative effort that keeps the world going around smoothly. To match supply and demand. Interesting. I don't like that language. But it is a concept that we all understand, right? But beyond supply and demand, because supply and demand, is, especially within marketing, especially within capitalism and consumerism, there's always going to be a fabricated demand, and there's always going to be a lie about the supply, whether that be in quantity and pricing and, you know, elitist withholding or what have you, where they create a different level of need around the quantity. So, you know, again, the manipulations of the systems. The earth does not work in that way. The earth supplies and demands honor and demands assistance in regeneration. Not that it needs our assistance, it'll burn or blow us all away on its own accord. But I think it lashes back when we do not assist in regeneration. It's almost like it knows when we're just taking, and makes it very clear that it does not like that, or that the earth does not appreciate that. And so there's a shift in the there's a shift in the financial system because of this. There's very much a shift in the financial system because of this. Why do you think war is happening? It is because of spirituality, yes, but it also is for resource and for modes of control around resource. And rather than figure out a way to regenerate resource, instead, the government doubles down on non-renewable resources and resources that do more harm than good because of supply and demand, unfortunately. And so I've thought a lot about this. Even the banking system functions in the same ways. It's a falsified supply and demand chain. But if we were to figure out, I think this was what is it, central banking, not the Bank of America, that's a whole other organization. The main banking system, you know what I'm talking about. I forget what the fuck it's called. Central banking system. When they first put that into fucking play, when that first became a bill, which was not by anybody in office, it was by some tertiary party, some fucking bigwigs at a table, right? To develop this central banking system. At one point in time, it limited the castes of people that were able to invest greatly. Now, because of this very thing, because we've noticed that currency is not a regenerative source, it is in fact being hoarded, again, falsified supply and demand, there's multiple new modes of investing in smaller sum, investing in change, investing in, smaller ideas rather than companies, betting systems. This is how they were able to trickle it down to facilitate gambling as such a desired response. And that isn't regenerative either. Quite honestly, it is perhaps an attempt at it, but marketed through exploitation of impulse. This is also why I've very much turned to micromediation in so many ways, shapes, and forms, because it is something that continues to regenerate itself as well as other resources around it, rather than it just be, like even eco-friendly fabrics. They're not regenerative, and they're not as helpful as they may advertise. In fact, the fine print would go to show that there's a lot more polyfibers and plastics in them. There's just enough of a percentage of a natural fiber for them to qualify as advertising that. So, all of these things are true. However, I think Aries, as a system, has leaned more into the lie and the manipulation rather than its responsibility toward regeneration and to extend that energy, not itself. We don't gotta be people pleasers and extend ourselves, but to extend that energy, to extend those ideas, which realistically is exactly what I'm trying to do here. Yay to my South Node. Oh gosh, where was I? Yes. This sign often shows outstanding ability as an artist, particularly in the field of music. Heron loves and enjoys all of the arts, either as a performer or simply as one who appreciates the finer things of life. Here is a very satisfactory field to follow, for this sign is very independent and resents supervision of any kind. Anything that can be done solo is definitely preferred, even if it means irregular hours and very little job security. If leadership positions are not forthcoming, they will work longer hours for less pay rather than submit to rigid conformity. This is, I think, a mode of confidence that the world collectively is stepping into, because the supply and demand of the job market has changed drastically, and so a lot of people are taking a chance on themselves, putting some faith into their ideas, and trying to build their own thing, rather than submit to a system that they no longer feel safe or supported in. A caretaker in a wildlife preserve, for example, they may have trouble staying with the same position over a long period of time unless the job itself offers a wide variety of loosely supervised activity. This is a sign of a dreamer, one who has a fertile imagination, who can transform a vision into a reality, can take cobwebs and weave them into a gossamer veil, one who can wander the maze and find the heart of the earth. Find the heart of your earth, dear. You are the earth in so many ways. Find your heart, who has one foot in a deep dark cave and the other on a fleecy white cloud, who can gather the gifts of Gaia and put them to practical use. Heron is a bright star in the sky for all mortals, the herald of a golden age. Interesting. That's a distinction that I think is pertinent, and maybe an ego check for Aries energies. If the heron is a bright star in the sky for all mortals, keyword mortals, there are immortal conscious beings. Collective consciousness is immortal. And that is the thing that I think Aries needs to understand, that it is responsible to, not responsible for. And that's a check of where it finds itself in the status system. It is important to strike a balance between conflict and compliance. There is a thin line separating genius and foolhardiness, and it is necessary to walk the tightrope over the two. Holding a grudge is negative, narcissism is limiting, insecurity resulting in timidity is demoralizing. Damn, okay. Eccentricity can become too far out, And a troublemaker without just cause is nothing but a nuisance. When your plans and processes are way out ahead of your time, don't be impatient with others who are stuck in the horse and buggy mode. Don't try to save the whole world before the sun is south. And don't forget to stand up for your own rights, as well as the rights of others. The importance of the individual and the group must be given separate but equal consideration. And that is particularly important because when we consider these energies and its lust for status, oftentimes these are the things that are first sacrificed, is your ability to stand up for yourself, for your own rights or for the rights of others, if it holds you in proximity to narcissism, to affluent and assimilated narcissism. There's too much to do and too little time. A few rounds of rest and relaxation will erase the wrinkles of recurring controversy. Damn. There's too much to do and too little time. A few rounds of rest and relaxation will ease the wrinkles of recurring controversy. Beautiful. Because I very much feel that. There's a lot to do, and that's very much aware of the go, go, go energy, but you move faster and more efficiently when you take the time to understand where it is it's coming from. Otherwise, you're just kind of beating your head against a wall. Or what is it they say, like doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is also the definition of insanity. What did I say? What did I say? My gosh. Okay, so for Aries season and for the Aries in the rooms, their birthdays, the owls, the herons, the crocodiles, and the wind currents, we'll pull some cards for each sign to give you a little top and bottom action, to give you a little top and bottom card read of perhaps some words of wisdom, some nuggets of wisdom for you to take through this Aries season, for you to take through this new astrological season, for you to carry through and germinate like a seed through the spring. Sound cool? Sound fair? Sound fun? And we will start with Aries because it is your season, and we will move through all signs. And if you are Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, there are transliterations for those Western astrologies into Indigenous astrology as well that you can find on the rest of my page. As we carry on through the cycles, I will be going through each one so that we can peel back some layers and understand a little bit more of the chemical nuance, dalliance that is these energies. I suppose it's more than a dalliance, it's very much intimate, more so than a flirtation. All right, Aries. All right. Much like we have cards between us, because we do, much like we are hanging out, because we are, we'll take 3 deep breaths. We'll channel into the Aries season. Please note the fullest breath that you can take and any sensations that may arise as we tap into all of the energies in Aries. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Oh, gosh. Okay. Very much breath coming from a solar plexus place, like solar plexus tension, which directs me back to this confidence or conviction thing. And very much the ways in which Chiron is going to dominate and always have an undertone of these energies for as long as it's still within Aries. Which is a great mode of insecurity and a great mode of something to prove, or a great mode of the ways in which the stories we tell ourselves are perhaps not the most becoming. And that is something that we have to reckon with. What have we become? And is it the thing, the kind of thing that we aimed to? Or have we become much like our opposite? Have we become much like our own enemy? Have we, lost ourselves along the way and become our own oppressor? Oh me, oh my. Gosh. Six of Hearts inverted, Five of Hearts inverted. Also very much solar plexus energy. Very much solar plexus energy, but if you notice, one's kind of like more transparent than the other. And so, though we are considering the totality of these things, considering the possibilities of these things, it is very much a time where you can root into it, explore, go deeper into why, again, not what you want, but why you want it. And that will help to build toward what you want in a deeper way. That will help to define this sense of self in a much deeper way. Think of it like a real solid outline where it looks so independent and also so real and also so unreal, like the old Legend of Zelda cel-shaded, like the first few cel-shaded games. That is maybe a very specific illusion or metaphor, but it's very much like, cartoony kind of. And there's a very much an air of nostalgia, but not even necessarily for a nostalgia that we maybe even remember. And there's something so fresh and new that also carries through, or that wants to be carried through. And so the Six of Hearts is maybe a little bit of back to the drawing board, kind of similar to this too, like, why does it go down 6 to 5? Because this isn't all about full speed ahead. This is very much about, like, check your brakes, check your tire pressure, is your service engine light on, and what are you going to do about it? Do you have a plan for when it does go on, or are you going to find yourself screwed and stranded? Because then it'll only be you screwing and stranding yourself. And the Six of Hearts inverted is imperfection. Maybe too much focus on our imperfection, Gosh, especially as I feel like I'm like reading Aries for filth, right? It is an inversion of the sense of self. And so I think that comes with the terms that we use to define ourselves, the ways in which we feel we've even built, success or security or safety, and how we define those key terms. And oftentimes what is really needed is at odds with capitalism, is at odds with fascism. And so that doesn't make your needs or, your needs being met or not being met a failure. Or your needs being met being a failure, even if it's viewed as a failure in the eyes of that system. We're recalibrating things altogether, which is very much this Five of Hearts energy, but it's an internal recalibration, like a perspective recalibration. The ways in which we retaliate in situations has a lot more to do with our impulse control. It kind of reminds, gosh, especially with everything going on, like, you know, like all the Hitman games. He's real chill. He's real quiet. He's not like quick to fucking, you know, run in guns blazing. And I think that's what we think all hero moves ought to be. And Aries wanting to be the hero and the leader and the savior of the day, um, has to recognize that there's many forms of that, and it's not all, you know, just this, you know, heroic Hollywood movie scene. It does take a lot of work and a lot of planning and a lot of editing and a lot of structuring. And so that is this call toward the Five of Hearts inverted, because that's exactly what they would want, you know, a little bit more solitary work, a little bit more independent labors, but it's going to have to do with you recognizing yourself and you looking yourself in the mirror. You know, going back to the drawing board, going back to the drafting board, and filling in some blanks along the way. And like I said, defining some key terms. Much like, you know, when we were reading through that, and I was like, well, marketing is really manipulation, and da 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 da. What other ideas, terminologies, languages, root words innervate into these things that we aspire to or seek or struggle with, even? You know, so many people feel like they're fighting with themselves to not be lazy. You know, rest came up as well. And is laziness even real? Or is laziness just a puritanical capitalist myth to keep us head down and in the chain of supplying labor? Because realistically, in the demand of capitalism, is the demand ever finished? Which is exactly why they're optimizing AI for it, because they want to figure out other ways to work our minds to a grinding bone. It's not like it frees up time for creativity. And so we have to free up time for creativity. And that's what going back to the drawing board is. The Five of Hearts is very much a space for creativity. So yes, we may be going against a lot of mechanics. And when you know the blueprint of your own, you can move more efficiently through. You can mitigate the circumstances that much more, with that much more awareness. And that is true of all things, not just internally, but externally. But we start with internal. You want to be the baby of the zodiac? Well, attention's on you. Eyes are on you. You want to be all fire? Well, let's find the root of the flame, so that it can carry on in a way that isn't destructive. Because it's very much, I think, the cusp that this is on. And I think as time progresses through this, we'll see a drastic difference between, or, you know, that much more separation between perceptions of reality. And that exists outside of us, yes, but, you know, also internally, with the ways in which we see ourselves and the ways in which we carry ourselves. The ways in which we think ourselves to be and the ways in which we present ourselves to be. This is that drawing board. And I think very much cleansing the elements of you so that you can see clearly. And build something that you can be proud of. Which is there. The Six of Hearts, it is there. It is there. I think we're just looking far outside of ourselves rather than internally. And I get it, you know, get nice outside. Everybody wants to go show their ass off. But it gets nice outside. So maybe that means, you know, spot clean your floors. Maybe that means dust your shelves. Dust the shelf of your mind and your own expectations. And you can see where that current will carry you. You can see where there's space to move. You can see where there's space to flow. You can rearrange these priorities in the mind so that they align more succinctly and to your highest benefits. And not just yours, but to time as it progresses, to the many versions of you, to others in general as well. Gosh dang, Aries. Build on, but start with the foundation, yeah? Taurus, my love, let's rock, let's roll. Taurus, Taurus, Taurus. Taurus, Taurus, Taurus. What say you about the Aries season? The heron, the owl, the crocodile, and the wind. Okay. 9 of diamonds, 5 of spades. Upright. That's a nice difference. 9 of diamonds, 9 of diamonds. That's wonderful. It was very like lush and green and very much an extension of self. But Taurus is much more, yes, capable of fire, but very rooted in where it comes from. Aries could learn a lot from Taurus, honestly. However, this 5 of spades is maybe a mode of like, hey, what's been working has been working well. Don't forget about your creativity. Don't bore yourself, you know. Maybe you're not boring anybody else, but don't bore yourself. And, you know, part of the lust of life, though we can get very comfortable in our, you know, own fostered support and stability and, you know, the security that we've built for ourselves, or, you know, the ways in which we ground into ourselves. Don't lose sight of creativity. Don't lose sight of excitement. And allow that stability to become an expansive thing, you know, that can facilitate modes of stability in mind, you know, support in body, you know, support in communication of desire that doesn't just stop with you. It doesn't just stop with you. I feel like there's like, yes, all things are like going great, going well. Yes, there is growth, and yes, there is more to be had. However, when the finish line is that close, you know, or the quote-unquote finish line is that close, you know, do we find ourselves boring ourselves, or do we find ourselves procrastinating because we kind of already know the outcome, or because we, you know, want to prolong the outcome for any reason? You know, like I feel like I do this with books. And sitting home and reading, right? Sitting home at tea and reading. Sitting home with tea and reading. I feel like is a very Taurus thing for me to do. And so there's some books that I've loved that like I'll only have like 60 pages left, and I'm like, oh, but I want to finish it, but I don't want to because I know that I'm not gonna want what happens, or I know that I'm gonna miss these characters when they're gone, or I'm gonna miss this world when I have to close this book, and so I kind of prolong amount of time it takes me to finish it because I just want it to keep living in my mind. I feel like that is an element in here. I feel like that very much is an element in here. However, with the amount of, I guess, like ease and growth that we've seen, there will always be more. There will always be growth and there will always be more. So just don't forget to keep it fun and fresh and interesting for you. And don't forget to remind yourself to enjoy and have fun. You know, the spring is very much a season of new. And so you're absolutely able to reinvent whatever the fuck it is you want, including yourself, without feeling like you are abandoning what you've built. Does that make sense? And don't let your mind get away from you and your body. Keep those things in coherence. Lovely. Gemini, Gemini, Gemini. Oh, Gemini, an eye for an eye. 3 eyes and the whole world sees. Beautiful, beautiful. Seven of Hearts inverted, Two of Spades. Outright. Upright. Seven of Hearts inverted. Interesting. Sevens are beautiful, but confusing, right? There's very much these elements of too much information or not enough. I think it's points in time where we feel like we lack belief because we've yet to see it become or present itself or like realize or actualize in some way, shape, or form. Do not seed that, you know, like this is not the time to seed doubt and disbelief. However, with hearts, it's very akin to cups. So I think it's very much like, you know, where are we leaking emotional energy or leaking our spiritual energy and feeling very drained because of that, and maybe blaming other people, Two of Spades, at odds with others or at odds with ourselves because we're, you know, bleeding out or leaking energy or trusting people that we don't need to be trusting, or, you know, entertaining bullshit that we don't need to be entertaining because we've lost faith in ourselves or because we've lost grounding within ourselves. Because sevens are also beautiful and ancestral and very much ways in which we can trust the universe, but exactly that, it requires trust. It's not going to prove itself to you for your trust. It just will dance with you when you're willing to dance at all. And that's something that the Two of Spades is beckoning toward. Like, trust yourself. Trust yourself, and you'll be able to trust the universe deeper. Trust your intuition. Trust the ways in which you allow your intuition to guide you. Let it not be confused with the process of assumption or the process of expectation, so often linked to entitlement. Likewise, assumption, that often I think we do confuse. Intelligence is not intellect. Intelligence is being able to read a book and being like, yes, I remember that sentence in that book. Intellect is being able to take that idea in that book and recognize parallels or patterns in other books. And your intellect is maybe more akin to processes of assumption. However, the point in intellect is to be discerning of, entitlement or presumption, and sort of, like they say, if you look for something, if you look for a particular kind of information, you'll find a confirmation bias if you really want to. And beyond that space, where we have discernment is where we find intuition. And sort of, again, going back to Aries and consciousness, it is collective consciousness, it is universal consciousness, it is prime consciousness, beyond and below or deeper than impulse, deeper than what we would deem a primitive nature, which is very much colonial and assimilative rhetoric. So let us not do a great disservice to the consciousness that surrounds us by negating it to just impulse and assumption, and learn to trust ourselves, learn to dance like nobody's watching, learn to sing like nobody's judging, learn to go back in time and heal a version of ourselves that needed it so that it can move forward with us and not feel left behind. Because that's the thing too, is I think, in these points, oftentimes people are like, well, fuck this version of me because I want to be this version of me. And then they find struggle in manifesting that because there's this space of dissonance. But when we're able to cognitively, somatically, intuitively, via various methods, meditation is simply one, being able to go back effectively and interact with that version of ourselves, or some instance that requires healing, so that we can set it free. And because of that, it moves with us. Because of that, it's like, oh, hey, you're really good to me, and I'm going to help you out like you helped me out. And we feel more whole. We get to walk with that, young spark in us. We get to walk with all aspects of us, because there is not one that feels isolated or subordinated or ostracized. And this is the gate of that union. This is sort of a threshold of passing into that union. And the ways in which we also can guard it and sort of, thou shalt not pass about it, which, yes, is a protective mechanism, but if you learn to trust yourself more deeply, then you won't have to feel so defensive or so guarded or so protective of your energy. And that is because when you trust yourself, you can also trust in the universe. And when you can trust yourself, you don't really have to trust other people. You just have to know whether or not you trust yourself, and always go with that. You don't have to wait for people to be trustworthy or prove you right or wrong. If you trust yourself, then your intuition will lead, your body will lead, and it will let you know what it needs. Not what it wants, but what it needs. And that is the recurring theme of a lot of this with Aries, is not just the impulse, but the devotion. Cancer, Cancer, Cancer. You hot little fireball. I mean, it's all water, right? But not exactly. Not exactly. It is water, but it is a fire of water, which is why Cancer can be so intense. All right, Cancer. Oh, okay. Interesting. Interesting. Six of Spades, King of Spades. King of Spades inverted. What are we protecting? We're protecting insecurity. Go figure. Cancer energies with all of this Aries understanding going on is very much defensive, is very much guarded, is very much maybe even running from something and trying to protect themselves. But this King of Spades inverted is very much like, I think, exhausted, burnt out, very much exhausted. And I think very much maybe lost sight of why it wants to fight or wants to thrive or wants to build in any way, shape, or form. Interesting. What's in Cancer? Jupiter's in Cancer. It's kind of maybe like a full overhaul of like, where's the story going? Do I want it to go there? Do I scrap everything and start over? Or redirect? And what does that say about me if I do? You know, it reminds me of like when kids were in college and they would decide to change their major and they'd go through this whole like existential crisis of like being a failure, of wasting their time, of wasting their money, of wasting da 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 da. However, all of this sports, spades and swords energy, I think very much goes to show that that's very much a mentality thing, a mind preference thing, or point of view kind of thing. And again, define our key terms. If we redefine failure in a decolonial way, outside of capitalism, outside of fascism, then it's not a waste of time, it's not a waste of money, it's not a waste of effort. It is always a growing experience. It is always a learning experience. And I think that may be difficult for Cancer because it's going to be more opportunities for learning, and that isn't just fluid flow. That's a lot of detours. And so, like we reroute a river, there's a lot of splishing and splashing that happens. There's a lot of things that fall out of place. But likewise, and very realistically, when we dam up heavy currents in avoidance, like the Six of Spades, then we create a lot of pressure that bubbles up, that boils over, that bursts through. There's a lot of dams, actually, across the U.S. that are failing, that are faltering. And that is failure in the sense that they are designed to hold water back and they are at their breaking points. Let us not get to our breaking point, but let us understand that what we assume is failure, as in things not going perfectly right or flowing perfectly smooth, or going our way even, going the same direction that we are in flow, is not a failure, is in fact a learning opportunity. And I think in so many ways we're learning how to communicate differently. We're learning how to, expand our communication, but also digest what we're being communicated in a deeper way, especially because everything is just so overwhelming and inundating. And difficult to discern at times, but let that not be felt as a failure and seen more as a learning opportunity. Let that not make your shoulders slump and your spine bend, but let that fill you with excitement to see farther and beyond, much like the river flows. There's much more to be gained by expression, by being able to show yourself, by, again, finding that conviction and taking a chance on yourself and your confidence. Because I think, Six of Spades and King of Spades inverted, protecting that insecurity will really only substantiate and compound the impact that any even slight misalignment or slight hiccup has on your ideas of failure and the personal impact that it has on you and the ways in which you see yourself. And it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. This King of Spades inverted can also be like an incredible grounding capacitor, like an incredible rooting point, like a stake in the ground that you can tether your boat to. All these water illusions, but like a buoy, like a fucking anchor, like a fucking anchor point. The King of Spades inverted is like an anchor point for deep water explorations in Cancer sort of ideologies, and that anchor is our southern fire root amidst the ways in which water carries. And that it carries only where you need to go and where you intend to go. Because wants can be a little hard to negotiate when we're dealing with the magnitude of water. And that is also why I think, it's not just as easy as I said you're going to be fixed and healed, now do it. No, it's a learning and an integrating and a somatic understanding that really allows you to tell yourself this thing and also feel that story flow through, rather than just dictate to the self and wonder why the water doesn't do what you need it to do or want it to do, but because what it needs to do is for you to anchor into it unafraid, and without defense. That is not to say unarmed, but that is to say without instinctive defense, because instinct is just as underwhelming as impulse. Instinct is no more prime consciousness than any of what we've talked about thus far with amygdala and pleasure and pain. Instinct is, again, I think, a silly word that we used to excuse our lack of impulse control. Intuition goes farther than that. And I think we very much conflate those two terms. Your instinct is not your intuition. Your instinct is an excuse to not use your intuition. Speaking of, I feel like this is going to be very relevant. Leo. Leo, how are you? Does Leo have a relationship to the dragon? Interesting. I don't know. There is very much a fire element, and so Mars is very much helpful in that. Jupiter is very helpful in that. As far as the dragon, yes, Southern Fire, actually, duh. Okay. Leo would technically be a wolf or the star, but the dragon is also in the sky with it. Noted. Interesting. Okay. 5 of Diamonds, King of Spades, inverted. Yet again. You heard how many times I shuffled? There's a lot of similar elements here because Leo is very much a pomp and circumstance. Oftentimes a superficiality queen, in my experience. This 5 of Diamonds is very much going to require more patience to be able to see that growth. I think Leo is coming to understand that they have to create something else, something deeper, something more tangible, something more real than just this idea that they have of themselves inside, than just this idea of what they want to be perceived as. They have to really root into that if that is going to be consistent and true. And the King of Spades inverted here, similar elements of insecurity, but I think is maybe an inversion of truth. In a lot of ways, is Leo trying to be somebody for somebody else? Or trying to be something that they don't actually want to be? And I mean, gosh, who isn't finding themselves in some setting or some circle or some job or what have you that they don't feel aligns with them anymore? I think very much across the board, we can all relate to that in some way, shape, or form. And so Leo energies across the board and in all of us are perhaps understanding what it means to go back to the drawing board and reassess those things and perhaps reroute in those things. If we find that something's not growing in a certain area of the house, then we adjust as necessary and as needed. And I don't think Leo is happy or content being adjusted or being sort of solidified into any particular place, that especially if it does not feel like it's fully in line with them. And so that adds to the exhaustion, quite honestly, even intense depression. The idea that there's such a farther and farther disunite between what we're doing and what we want to do, or what we feel we need to be doing, and where our attention really is, and what we're feeling forced to do every day, or maybe even the cyclical reality of that feels exhausting, of knowing that you have to wake up and go to work and deal with bullshit, and then overcompensate for coworkers, and then come home and feel drained, but also stay up watching YouTube because that's the only time you feel like you have to yourself, and then waking up late and having to do it all over again. That is not the life that Leo wants. Leo wants more beauty and more excitement and more, not even just power, but like eminence, because it can weave throughout so much. This is why, like the lion's mane and this hair and this, sort of gorgeousness, this lavishness, it pours over onto things. It pours over onto things. Even like the idea of like lions and prides, like you see one and then they all kind of pour out from the shadows, right? And not even just that, but like wolves travel very much like that. The stars, we notice one, and then we start to notice that the many, many around them and different levels of brightness and whatever. But the sky very much pours over you in that. The dragon very much weaves throughout in that. And I think we're finding an incredible, uncomfortable mentality with the disunite in that. And it's manifesting very physically in like literal exhaustion and literal overwhelm and literal depression. And we're, yes, hoping that the spring and the sun changes all of that. But if we don't address what that disunite and that distance within our mind and our body is, then we'll find ourselves growing farther and farther away from ourselves throughout the season, rather than stepping into the season as the fullest self with the fullest curls, and feeling as beautiful inside as people perceive outside, or vice versa. It's a rough place to be. But it's also kind of like a blank slate in a way. Like, I feel like emotionally it's a really rough place to be. But in all actuality and with like all cards on the table, it's a blank slate. It's a clean slate. It's a clean work surface. So, like, don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. And also don't neglect yourself. Even if it feels more fun. Alright. Sweet Virgo. Sweetie Virgo, baby. Let's see what you've got going on these days. Alright, love. Why am I not surprised? 4 of diamonds, 5 of clubs. Creating something. 5 of clubs is very much fire, so this is like the direction of fire, which has been a reoccurring theme, right? Direction of creation. But it is more of our bottom of the deck. What are we moving toward? 4 of diamonds is like toward a new reality, toward a new, honestly, like toward new cornerstones of value, even 4 new cornerstones of like safety, foundation, like enunciation, even in just those few breaths, like the bits of things that I'm picking up was very much like it's something that had come up earlier with like the anchor point, or like a stake on the shore. This is very much that like noticing like a flag in the distance, noticing a flag on the horizon, and you're like, okay, that's where I need to go. That's what I'm aiming for. That's what I that's what I intend to look forward to. That's what I intend to come home to. And so perhaps there is an incredible level of freedom that Virgo embraces. However, that does not mean that grounding is restriction. That does not mean that having a safe place within you, or, safe little rituals that you do, does not equate to, boring and trapped. Oftentimes I think we can be so analytical and so keen on the details that it's easy to poke holes in anything, and so we just don't do anything. It's easy to poke holes in everybody else's philosophy, so why bother coming up with your own? When in actuality, that is very much maybe even like your strength, being able to synthesize ideas and find, plug up the loopholes and find ways in which these ideas can actually coexist, or these ideas can actually be, weeded out and come to a more embraced fruition, a more even spread fruition, even. Because so much of Virgo too is like this pedestal of, especially in Western astrology, is this like pedestal of like the Holy Virgin, and in so many ways that's so rigid, that's so restricting, that's such an expectation and an assumption upon. And so I find in very real life a lot of Virgo people are hypercritical and very much reject anything like that. But this 4 of Diamonds is like, you don't have to have any of that. And this 5 of Clubs is like, you can make your own. You can make your own, as long as it, doesn't hurt anybody, makes you feel safe, and makes you feel, secure and heard. And in so many ways, I think we can reject so much that we forget to ground into or lean into what it is we do believe or what it is we do care about. It's kind of like when cynicism gets so far beyond itself that we forget the things that we even have hope for. But again, we're kind of, those 5 of Clubs, we're kind of at a solid drawing board. We've burnt down the rest of the shit. So now we can start with Rebel and Ash and rebuild something entirely. Oof. I wonder what else has that energy, honestly. Or Virgo energies in other countries and what they're building. I think 4s can also be kind of like planes of glass that we look through. Not just the compartments that we're in, but the tinting on the ways in which we see. And so again, this 5 of Clubs is like, burn that shit down. You can see clearer through the fire. You can see clearer over the heart of the flame. And, that's not to be reckless or extreme. That is to say, have we accumulated too much of what we don't want? Again, in regards to cynicism even. Have we rejected so much of what we don't want that we've lost sight for what we do? Or that we've lost sight for what we hope for? Have we run so far from a thing that we forgot what we were running to? But the Four of Diamonds is here, is waiting for you. Is door open? The Five of Clubs just requires you to work with it. To work with your energy to be able to pass that threshold. And to perhaps create something altogether new. Which, you know, actually, I think in so many ways that the way Virgo is akin to so many, like, female representations or deities, or, like, you know, the Sacred Guadalupe, and the ways in which that can even be integrated with various other modalities of feminine deities that are creator, yes, but also destroyer. And the clever balance between the two, and the necessity for the two, that gives it a more full body. And so I think that is something perhaps to lean into, because there are many feminine archetypes at war in the sky that are assisting us in this war that we are in, and perhaps being able to see things anew. And, like, yes, there's very much, you know, a lot of new people running for office, and a lot of new modes of, you know, authority, and a lot of new people in power. However, I think it's also important to remember that a woman in power under a patriarchal role is still the patriarchy. The solution to what's going on isn't necessarily just electing new women into the same old bullshit roles that are controlled by the same old bullshit, but it is a new paradigm or perspective of the ways in which rule can even be had. And I, myself, am much more of a decolonial anarchist, in which case that does not mean chaos and flame. That does mean responsibility. That does mean emotional intelligence and integrity. Because when you are responsible to your energy, responsible for your energy, responsible to your energy, and responsible and honor your responsibility to others, then that is perhaps the only law that you need. Speaking of Libra, what say you? And Libra, being a Western Earth and a Northern Air, is exactly how that current carries. And it has so much more to do with just the charge and the capacitor, which is like ideal you. It is the ways in which we bridge the body and the mind. And not just for ideals, but for harmony, which is very much a tenet of Libra, even in Western ideologies. Oh, Libra. Six of Diamonds, Seven of Diamonds. Ooh. What an interesting move forward. So there's very much, again, earth elements within this, or diamonds can be very much pentacles as well. Gosh, I wish this was a 9. I want it to be a 9. It's a 9 inverted, which honestly goes to say something. The 6 may feel like it's not quite at its halfway point yet, but you know what? It's so much closer to fulfillment than you think. And with that comes great patience and proof of growth that you can then build more faith into. And, you know, even in just in those few breaths, rather than, you know, your typical scales and this separation of weighing the two things, it was more like throw it all into the fire. Throw it all into the fire and see what goes up in flames and see what persists. And and with that, there's discernment, but not discrimination. There's discernment that also occurs naturally. Kind of like the way you can throw other shit into the fire and it'll turn different colors because different chemical makeups and what have you. I think this is also kind of like a mode of you have what you want, you have what you need, try something, and it'll take you, try something new and it'll take you farther than you ever could have initially believed. Try something new and it'll give you something new to anchor in, to have faith in, to stay rooted and hopeful in, which is perhaps more of an expansive and compassionate idea for Libra than just us versus them. Because even in that ideology, like, yes, oh, for sure, I get it, you know, the proverbial day, 100%. We talk about it all the time. However, the proverbial day is not a person, it is a system. It is a framework. It is an ideology that has intravenously poisoned many things, which is the quality of our soil. The quality of our soil and the growth that we see from it. I do think this is a really good place of, like, you're seeing the kind of reflection that, you know, you try to emanate into the world, you know, like the efforts that you do to produce, you know, your own resource, your own patience, your own, you know, regenerative resource for yourself and others is something that is reciprocal, something that is flowing, something that is growing, and something that will continue to grow when you stay rooted in purpose, when you stay rooted in directive, and that means staying true to yourself. Again, root of the fire, rather than being, you know, misguided or misled or lost in impulse and instinct and finding one day down the road that you lost sight of yourself and all of that. Or lost sight of the goal and all of that. In such a funny way too, like, because Libra is so, you know, justice and everything that's going on. Is the ways in which I think so many more people are learning to redefine these key terms as well. Like, what does justice mean to so many? Oftentimes it means, you know, very Hammurabi's eye for an eye, or very much, you know, kill or be killed. And that's not justice, that is war. And if you've read my Speaking Truth to the Power of Peace, you know that war and peace are not synonymous and are not equal sides of opposites. In fact, that was a planted mistranslation for great purpose. Not a great purpose as in good purpose, but for a big purpose. And that is the mode of Western imperialistic control. And so what feels like small growth is also us, I think, healing the soil. And I think healing our key terms, and I think healing our ideas, and planting new ones so that more people can see that there are other options through this. There are other ways solutions can be found, that problems can be solved. There always are. There always are. And so maybe this is also kind of a little vote of brainstorm. Of, not just brainstorm, but like, get your fingernails a little dirty, get some dirt on your fingernails, get your hands a little dirty, and workshop and see what fits. And see what you can't peel back even more for clarity. And see what you can't try just for the hell of it. Because you know what? Everything's fucking crazy. And everything's really surprising. So what's the worst that can happen if you try something new? If you try something that other people don't necessarily believe in or buy into yet. Try something new. And with respects to the ways in which it will give back and feed and regenerate and honor not just the land but your body. Honestly, I think another form of land back is the ways in which we treat our body, the ways in which we honor our body, and that is outside of Western consumerist wellness, but very much the stories that we tell ourselves. And right now I think we all need a little vote of confidence that, like, the story is still being written. The story is still being written, and the consciousness around us is still speaking if we're willing to listen. But so many are speaking over, or talking over, or shouting over, because they've lost so much sense of control outside that it has become personal inside, yes. But so many modes of control in structures and frameworks and systems too. So much loss of faith in those things that should not feel like you lost faith in yourself. That it's just faulty systems collapsing. The framework of faith in yourself is the beautiful thing that is building because those things are collapsing. And that is perhaps a brighter side to look at it in. I hope that helps. Oh, Scorpio. Scorpio, what say you? Okay. This came up earlier, but I can't remember which sign. 2 spades. 2 spades top of the deck, 4 of hearts bottom of the deck. Interesting. Relational capabilities. This is about the bridges that we build and the worlds that we build based on deeper senses of self, intuition, deeper inner thoughts, even, again, root of the flame. The root of the flame and the ways in which it weaves is very much the stories that we tell ourselves and of ourselves, the ways in which we weave throughout, even this idea of scorpion and under the surface is kind of like that anchoring knot when you sew, and then how you kind of have to hide, the last finishing knots, sort of under the fabric or in between layers of the fabric or what have you, or in the hems, so that you don't see the beginning and the end, and it's a seamless, fixing. It's a seamless patchwork or what have you. The Four of Hearts upright is like community, like a table, like a sharing, like an oscillating, like a game, even. And the ways in which, maybe sometimes Scorpio takes itself a little too seriously, because that inner world is real wild. However, don't let it just stay there. Breathe some life into it. Make it laugh. There's many cultures that celebrate the moment of a baby's first laugh, especially Aries baby, of a baby's first laugh. Not first cry, not first shout, not first scream, but celebrate the baby's first laugh, because that is when the soul has fully, accepted its new body and its new place and time. And in that, I think this Four of Hearts is that kind of lighthearted bonding, building, bridging of things. In so many ways, I also think humor is such a good defense mechanism, but also such a good healing mechanism too. Some of my favorite comics, present very divisive, but are very unifying and unifying because of their hilarity, because of the ways in which they speak, and because they're willing to sort of ignite both sides of any spectrum so as to unite in the middle in some way, shape, or form. I think that's a big part of like Scorpio sensibilities at this point in time, and the ways in which, yes, they can often feel very ostracized and misunderstood, but it is not about being understood. And if you, honestly, even if you go in that direction, like a teacher in teaching, if the student doesn't understand, then the problem isn't with the student necessarily, but a mode of new conduct can be in the ways in which we teach. And that's oftentimes what really gets students, is they're like, I just don't understand this way, I need this kind of assistance, I need this kind of accommodation, or I need this kind of help or explanation, or they don't know how they learn. And so you gotta kind of just try new ways to teach, try new ways to explain, new metaphors, new visions, new pictures, to get the same idea across. And this is very much like the language of our intuition, the language of like our spiritual vocabulary, and the symbol, the story behind the symbol, and in so many ways, the ways in which we can perhaps expand our vocabulary in that way, rather than reject that which does not necessarily relate. Because four has sort of like equal and opposite corners. They all interact, they all relate, they're all very much like each other, but seemingly on opposite sides. So in what ways do we build something that unifies, or that bridges that gap? Because even, for all the fives that came up, in like a pure alchemical creation, like Platonic creation, then the fifth point would be central, and it would be up, sort of like a pyramid, or an obelisk, or, any of the other various conductive, emanating structures that many often flock to for one reason or another. And so with that, it's interesting, like, maybe if we're less maybe if we're less, what did I say earlier too? Like, if you trust yourself, you don't have to worry about trusting other people. And that's very much this too. If you trust yourself, then you don't have to worry about trusting other people, because you will always find ways to bridge that gap or find relation, or, can trust in whatever you've created to be able to speak for itself. Trust in the trust in the story and its ability to weave and not assimilate. Not assimilate and become something else, but to weave throughout and unify these things while maintaining integrity in itself. And that can feel particularly hard for Scorpios because they are so different and so intense, and again, often feel misunderstood. But that may very well be a superpower, because I think everybody does feel misunderstood, and I think the more that Scorpio can show some love and trust to themselves, the more that other people, the more that Scorpios themselves will feel less misunderstood, and the more that misunderstanding will not hold so much weight, because that bonding is perhaps also in others that feel very misunderstood, and perhaps it's because they're operating from a system that lacks the intricacies of understanding that Scorpio is much better at really peeling back the surface for. So trust in that, even if it feels really far out. And gosh, can I get down with that? A lot of my ideas are very much like hot takes until, some affluent YouTuber says it. It'll be hot takes for years before it comes out in the news, and everybody's like, didn't you say that? Didn't you say that? Weren't you saying that? Yeah, and y'all told me I was crazy until it came out as fact, and now can't even get an apology. But I still won't be the one to say I told you so. I feel that, Scorpio. I do. But that is not because you are misunderstood. That is because people are very misunderstanding. I promise you, we're not that hard to understand. People just gotta open their ears more and expand their perceptive awareness. And that's actually quite difficult to teach. It is something that has to be experienced. And so being more of yourself makes that experience perceivable and believable. But trying to teach it is like throwing your head through a brick wall. You teach by being, by living, not by explaining. So stop explaining yourself or over-explaining yourself, justifying yourself because you feel misunderstood, and just be. Sagittarius. Hello, how are you? Sagittarius. Go figure. Moving targets, first and foremost, visually. Two of clubs, Jack of diamonds. Two of clubs is open skies, open sights, is very much ooh, is very much the mirage of a target, maybe even. You know how, like, we'll see something out of the corner of our eye and mistake it for something else, or we'll see, like, a reflection on something and we'll mistake it for something else. I feel like that's this moving target. And it is a false target, it is the illusion of a target, perhaps because, much like has come up before, a redefining of key terms outside of the same system, or outside of the systems that we are trying to dismantle. We cannot want to dismantle capitalism and its ideas of successes or failures if we are still using that rhetoric to describe our progress. Much like I said earlier, too, like redefining white supremacy as white narcissism, but maybe even more so than that, how do we dismantle white supremacy, or white narcissism, or imperialistic fascism based on proximity to white supremacy, or white narcissism, unless we peel back the layers of that fabricated language, because that really only came from government fucking documents as to whether or not you were a slave or not. And so, of the wild word choices that we have, I intend most often to, at the very least, correct myself and use words like assimilated or affluent, because this is also a classist system. So the affluent are white by proxy, and the assimilated are those that are white by proxy, which has come in many forms through various other peoples, marginalized peoples throughout history. And so this Two of Clubs is like, clear your horizons from false moving targets. Like if you're going bird watching, you know how they do that? They shoot birdies and it's like just these little discs. I've always wondered, why do they call them birdies? Because the idea is practice for shooting birds, I suppose. But it's like visually was kind of like that. Like if you think you're hunting big game, and in actuality the system's got you shooting these fucking clay discs, then, there's something blocking your sight. There's something in the way of your sight. And this Two of Wands or Two of Clubs, Two of Wands, it very much wants you to clear that area, to clear that threshold, to clear that pathway, so that you can see more clearly what it is you're aiming for, and whether or not it's something that you even want to hit. There were some key points about direction and aim in this last moon reading. So perhaps that's also a key point for this as well. And I just remember finding myself kind of like finding this torsion and this pullback a lot, that I think is really pertinent to our understandings of Sagittarian signs. And there's also a cycle of harmonies specifically for Sagittarius, which very much innervates into entirely different energies, and I think grounds so much more. And it's not, about travel and seeking and always seeking more and seeking adventure and seeking excitement. It is very much like a longing for belonging, and we find ourselves, constantly reaching out into different things, or you kind of notice the thing with relationships. When people really want to be chosen, they kind of will jump from relationship to relationship. That's very much, I think, a key point of like the Western understanding of Sagittarius and what it actually wants. Because that need to be chosen isn't about the partner or the destination, or the goal or the reward. It is about a deeper grounding and knowing, and a deeper need being met within that. And Jupiter being direct now, I think, is forcing us to see just how clearly or unclearly we're able to even see those things. And, for us, we're clearing away the fog. But for a lot of people, most, I don't think, have ever even considered or entertained the idea of like, but what does this mean? But what does this mean to me? But what does this actually mean in play? And that is something that, is happening more and more. I think people are very much dabbling into lost languages, very much digging deeper into etymology and, where source documents come from and what have you. And that is a very fucking Sagittarian thing to do. But without the long lost goal and the longing and aching for more, because there is fulfillment in knowing your own truth and in actualizing your own truth. At that point, then you are not seeking anymore. What did that thing say too about that book? About when you are seeking the flame and fail to recognize it within you, you'll always be seeking. That's a major part of this. The Jack of Diamonds at the bottom of this is very much that, like, key pentacle, that, like, deep earth root in self. And like I said earlier too, a form of land back is also taking autonomy and sovereignty of your body and its energy back. That includes your mind, that includes your heart, that includes your root and your impulse, that includes your water and the stories that you tell yourself and the ways in which you nurture yourself, which is in so many ways directly innervated to any energies in Aries at this point planetarily, but especially with Chiron and Aries, and also especially with the knowledge that Saturn and Neptune have from leaving Pisces. And whether or not we're going to go la 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 and bash our head through everything like a fucking Aries, or we're going to ground into ourselves, open our ears to possibility and to intuition and to listen to the voices inside of us. Because, much like I talked with the moon as well, like trusting of the narrator. So many of us are very distrusting of our mind because we have many a narrator in our minds that is not us. And it's hard to think clear. And quite honestly, I think they're cranking up some kind of like EMP or something to give us all fucking migraines. Or, I don't know, maybe it's 5G. But, and that's not just a conspiracy theory thing. There are lots of doctors who've written entire dissertations and books about the accelerated rate of chronic health issues that is directly in line with the acceleration of, technology and Wi-Fi expanding throughout the country and throughout the world. So, the idea of a conspiracy theory is such a silly thing. Even that is a terminology that we're learning to sort of redetermine, because let's be real, that used to be kind of like a joke and a way to write things off, and now I think we're all kind of putting our foot in our mouth when we do that. And in a very real way, if I'm having a conversation with somebody and they're like, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, I'm like, oh, you don't read very much, do you? Like, oh, you don't think for yourself very much, do you? But when, fucking, I don't know, Tucker Carlson or somebody fucking comes on air and says it, they're gonna be like, oh, yeah, did you see? Some affluent man that's part of the system told me this thing, and so now I believe it because somebody told me to. That's not Sagittarius energy. That's not what the Jack of Diamonds does. The Jack of Diamonds is very in tune. Young and full of life and full of possibility and curiosity, but because of that, has that much more open sight and open ear and open heart to new solution, new possibility. And because of that, clear sight. Clear sight, no static. And no distractions. And that is all the difference in the way an archer pulls their bow. Will the external circumstances and its own dictations be the thing that misdirects your shot? Or will you be able to tune that out and tune into a truer sense of you and see right through anything that it is you want to see through? Oh, Capricorn and turtle spirit, also the eagle. to some extent also where we see whirlwind or wind again, and where we see the owl again, but not just the owl, the vulture as well, and the roles in which they serve to regenerative process. Much like the misunderstanding of the flies on the death card, it is not just pungent death. It is very much a process to new life. It is very much new light to new life. Though the light has gone from behind the eyes of that which the vulture feasts upon, it is integral to the feeding of the earth, to the digestion of life, that gives light to new things, that breathes life to dead dreams. Well, that's an interesting change, and also, like, slightly not. Nine of Spades inverted, and the Jack of Diamonds again upright. Nine of Spades inverted. Like, I think a lot of the same can apply to this Jack of Diamonds. However, I think it's rooted in something maybe altogether new. Nine of Spades inverted. This is very much the cusp of an overwhelm. The cusp of overwhelm and intensity that I think often leads us feeling wanton, or like we need to do more, or like we're not doing enough, or, unable to see our own progress, unable to see, the growth or the impact that we have, therefore we do not believe it. And this Jack of Diamonds, I think, is very much remembering and a reminder that you are seed. You are seed of consciousness. Much like I've said recently too, like our own unconsciousness, our own individual, personal unconsciousness feeds the collective consciousness. That is why it is the way that it is. Everything that we are experiencing today is because of the collective unconsciousness and our unwillingness to deal with the shadow within, our unwillingness to tend to our own wounds or heal, our unwillingness to see beyond the parameters of a system we've been trapped in. It's blind ignorance. And that's not to be like fucking harsh, that's not to be fucking hard on you. But this Nine of Diamonds is very much like you are who blinds yourself. Like, this is a sense of overwhelm and like you choosing to carry too much and then being angry that it's too heavy. And Jack of Diamonds is like, but if you listened to your body, but if you stopped for a moment and, cessated your own expectations or whatever you're trying to prove, then you would have recognized earlier that your body's been saying no, that your mind's been saying I don't want to, that your heart's been saying I don't need to, that your intuition's been saying not this, the other thing, or something else, or not yet, whatever comes through. And in that, it is the younger of the suit cards but we learn just as much from our youth as we do our elders. There's a very cyclical relationship in that, and something that I think America falls very short of, of its greatest ills and poisons. It has been absolutely the human slavery and trafficking, absolutely the acquisition, the forceful and illegal and dishonest acquisition and taking of lands, but also children were always trafficked, children were always bred, children were always exploited in the ways that they are now. That was the imperialistic plan. Even James Jameson, the inventor of Jameson whiskey, is known for drawings that he has where he literally paid to buy a young teenage girl and then paid other men to eat her so that he could simply draw the experience. You can still find these drawings online too. That's why I don't fucking drink Jameson anymore, because it just tastes wretched now that I know that. And that is yet another example of how, like, this isn't a current, like, this isn't a once in a blue moon current thing that we're finding out. No, we're finding out that this has always been the game. And quite honestly, I think so many of us are exhausted because on one hand, a lot of us knew this and have known this, but on the other hand, so much of society is overwhelmed with, like, I can't believe that this is happening. And it's like, open your eyes, it's been happening. That, even though we are on quote unquote the same side or quote unquote the same understanding, there's still a big gap in understanding just how deep it goes. And this Nine of Spades is like, you have to take control of the weight in which you carry, and you have to understand what it means to be able to hold the weight that you carry, to be able to balance the weight that you carry, and understand what it means when something is no longer necessary to carry, no longer necessary or helpful toward whatever endeavors, like at a certain point, like, we know the system's fucked. So, as overwhelming as news and media can be, like, why? We know all of this. Why is it overwhelming you when we know all of this? When we know it's terrible, when we know that it's worse than it is, what we should be applying that overwhelm to, what we could apply that overwhelm to, is, rather than misguided and overwhelmed, what we could apply that directional energy to is solutions, rather than finding out more and more problems. This is something that I've also learned with people, is there's a very big difference in the ways that energy moves when people are comfortable just complaining and when people are more solution oriented. And so I think both of those exist within this energy, within you. In what ways do you just degrade yourself as complaints, rather than invest in growth that you know you are capable of? Growth that you know is possible, that you know you are capable of. And even if you don't necessarily, if you're like, I don't know that, you sure fucking can. You don't know that because you haven't committed to wanting to understand or believe that. Commit to yourself. Again, to the root of the flame, like to the thriving of the fire, to the living consciousness in your fire, and the ways in which that moves, and nothing will be able to hold you back. And that is the ways in which we can walk like we are protected, and we can walk like we are grounded, that we can, not just talk about these ideas, but move with them too, that we don't feel as alone in these understandings, because we're also able to listen to many that, you know, bridge or, you know, teeter on the border of understandings with us, and also the ways in which the elements in the earth and the body speaks through us as well. The body will tell you you're overwhelmed and burnt out well before you are like, cash the fuck out. It's very rare though that we find the time, that we make the effort to find the time to have that conversation. And that's not because we don't have the time, that's because so many other things are taking precedent in impulse. Because so many other things are like, but look at me, but I'm light and flashy. But Starbucks has a sale today. But Target has a sale today. But did you see this ad? But did you see this email? That all of that takes our energy away from being like, all right, silence, stillness. I'm going to sip my water by the window and listen to the birds fucking chirp. And I've said this before too, is I think that's why Christian nationalism fears Islam so much, is because, like, one, I think it's a scapegoat religion. I'm still very much like, it's still within the Abrahamic triad, you know, dark narcissism triad, and I'm very much like not pro organized religion in any sense of the word. However, I think Christian nationalism and Judaism and its control fear Islam, because what would we be capable of if we did anything 5 times a day? If we meditated 5 times a day, if we prayed 5 times a day, you know, if we spoke to the earth 5 times a day, if we listened to the wind 5 times a day, if we sang with the birds 5 times a day, we'd be unstoppable. But that is also because there's a big difference between the devotion that occurs when we are willing to listen to the earth and our surroundings, and the worship that so many religions partake in, that is subservient and subordinate and obedient, and also so wanton, and so expectant, and so entitled. As the huge mode of it is like, if you are obedient, then you will be protected under this status moniker. It's the same system. It's the same bullshit empirical system. No disrespect to, you know, spirits themselves, but mad disrespect to the fucking systems that they're in. And that is Capricorn for you. Oh, Jesus. Jesus. Isis. Aquarius, my dear. How is it that you are seeing through all that is in front of us? Aquarius, Aquarius, Aquarius. What secrets do you have for me? Okay. Five of spades, three of diamonds. Five of spades inverted. And I saw two heads of the serpents. Age of Aquarius is a paradigm shifter. Though Pluto has not been regarded as a planet, it is like the longest transit that defines so much more than I think we give it credit for. And the serpent is also one of a couple of reoccurring themes throughout astrology, and reoccurring sort of innovations throughout astrology that perfectly align in a golden ratio angle, especially between Tsiligi and Meshika astrology, that I think weave throughout all paradigms and all perspectives, which is why I am adamantly against basic 12-sign Western astrology, because it does not have that congruency or that synthesis or that simpatico with other cycles. It is not a part of the cycle of harmonies. The understanding of those energies is also the ways in which we harmonize within ourselves and find coherence within ourselves. So it's very much like these two serpents, just like in my face, which burrow, which go deep, which go deeper, which are also, silent but swift, which I think is very much the ingenuity of Aquarius in a lot of ways, though it is not the sign that is outright like its counterpart or its definer. But as far as these go, this five of spades and this three of diamonds, the serpents are in regards to that. The serpents are in regards to this five of spades sort of internal home, this internal safety zone. What I've learned so much throughout meditation and with other people is like this kind of safety place that you go to, this, or where you go to in dreams even, that is kind of a recurring theme, where you meet people that are familiar, or you get messages from people that, have touched you in some way, or in the gateway experience, the ways in which people sort of visualize those initial steps in the process is very much kind of like that, like your initial safe room. The ways in which Meta even has its like home screen kind of thing, or you can like build your own fucking VR homeroom or VR front room, that is modality of meditation, like as old as fucking time, where you go into this place where all things are possible. That is this five of spades. The three of diamonds that follows it is very much how we direct energy coherently, because we can go into that space and feel trapped in a hall of mirrors if our mind, our body, and our spirit, or our intuition and our process of prediction or assumption and our root memory are all out of whack and all out of coherence. This is where we find a lot of frustration with manifestation, or with actualization, or with any result from conjure. Well, I shouldn't say that, because conjure in and of itself is about the alignment of these three things. In so many ways, that triptych is reoccurring, is absolutely reoccurring. And it is not just those either, it's your presence and your present awareness. And because of that, the choices you make with it, that three expands or collapses. So if you're not present, if you're not aware of your breath, and your resonance is caught in a memory of the way things have been before, then the ways in which it projects is going to collapse into the same thing, and that's when we find ourselves sort of stuck in the same cycle. Whereas if you are able to bring coherence to your memory of any given thing, and be able to radiate or reflect that in in some sort of presence or actualization, that also maintains composure within your presence and with your breath or choice bridging that gap. Like, my memory says this, but I'm making new memories by doing that, and aligning with this current understanding of myself and growth. Then we see more expansion. Then we're able to see the ways in which your present state in time and your life force are able to flow more palpably into space and more viscerally with emotion, with vibration in some way. This is very much a key part of our projectional elements as well. This Three of Diamonds is also your dysregulation and your coherence or expansion or expression within that. Finding regulation is where this Three of Diamonds becomes a Ace of Diamonds or a King of Diamonds or what have you. Finding play within it is very much a Jack of Diamonds kind of thing. Finding reflection in it, perhaps, or larger expansive capacity in it is perhaps more of a Queen of Diamonds. But this Three of Diamonds is how we create. And so how do we create regulation? Through coherence, expansion, and expression. We find coherent thoughts in presence and in awareness. We expand that awareness with our presence and around our presence, and that is like aura, essentially. That is, again, like land back, it's not just taking care of your body as in fucking vitamins or anything like that. It is very much your awareness of the coherence of inner breath locks, the coherence of, your brain, your heart, your gut, but also the ways in which those things, those three, collapse to make the aura and the eminence and the projection of so. But not just that, the Three of Diamonds is also very much your reticular activated system in your brain, which is very much your reality in relation to your sensory input and your visual or memory literal kind of input. Visual is technically a sensory, but your sensory as far as like smell or taste or sound or what have you, because visual, yes, is the literal sight, and that is sensory, but your visual processing also very much comes from memory and comes from, again, that process of prediction, that process of assumption, rather than the process of creation, which is much more akin to intuition. With that is your memory, your will, or the five, and very embodied elemental conjuring of such a state, and your action there from it. In which ways it is not just a thought or imaginal or dream, it is something that is able to be projected into reality or acted upon in some way, shape, or form for people that are picking up new hobbies or breaking new habits or breaking old habits. It is the choice. Every day is a choice. It is every opportunity you have for a choice to choose something different. And that may look far more different than you and I can even begin to perceive. Perhaps far more different than we've even been able to wrap our head around or comprehend before. But it's still brewing. It's still very much brewing. And I think we will eventually come out of this like Mars-Pluto relationship insecurity and be able to see more clearly. So patience with yourself. Get these little things in line, stack your little logs, build your foundation, get your shit right, get your shit in line so that you can see clearly and see straight and see where you actually want to go. Okay, Pisces. Up next, what does Pisces have to say as it's saying goodbye to many energy and shipping it off to Aries boarding school? Of course, dropped everything. We dropped everything. All right, Pisces. Interesting. Okay. Oh, okay. Two very high calling cards, and very much it was like a black sunset. Or I don't know, like an occulted new moon, a new moon set. But very dark. Black sun. We'll go with black sun. Because that's exactly what it looks like. Jack of clubs, Queen of spades inverted. I don't like that. But it's not about my likes. I do feel like there's a level of subordination for emotional maturity for a new experience. There's a level of irresponsibility inherently in that it's almost like, you know, when auntie tells you, like, you don't need that motherfucker's attention because they're just a fuckboy, or like, don't go do that because it's gonna bite you in the ass. And this is like, you can't tell me what to do. I'm young. I can do whatever I want. You don't know. And in actuality, oh, they do. They've been there before. They're just trying to save you some trouble. But that's the thing. A lot of people are like they need to fall flat on their fucking face before they're willing to listen to anybody about it. I think this Jack of Clubs is an unruly fire. Is one without awareness. One that is so integral on, like, look, like, and trying to burn everything else down, that they're not listening to elders. You know, it's very much kind of like, you know, when there's like that teen that's like just at that age where they're like, I'm an adult now, you can't tell me what to do. And this Queen of Spades is like, I don't have to tell you what to do. I'm just letting you know that I've seen this before, and it does not go the way that you think it goes. As much as you think that it's going to go exactly the way you want, you better be ready for some detours. And this Jack of Clubs is like, fuck it. There's that clever balance in between these two. And I think that is to say, you know, there's a nuance to it. Like, for sure, in a very literal way, some of the older women in our lives that are like, don't go giving that man your attention. Or don't go da-da-da-da-da. Why do you go out dressed like that? Blah, 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 blah. Comes from a deep place of insecurity and jealousy, and comes from a deep place of comparison. And this is the ways in which patriarchy has utilized even women to uphold these sort of, you know, policing roles to maintain their own safety and security and status. It's like women compete with other women for male attention, and that is patriarchy. And that is where, like, stepmothers are like jealous of, like, the father's biological daughter, or, you know, step parents are jealous of the biological parents' children in some way, shape, or form. Quite honestly, where femininity is a threat, which is so sad, especially in a world that, like, loves to posture and, like, market about how feminine and beautiful and soft and radical it is. You know, new times and women in power, and it's really just patriarchy by another name. It really is just, you know, like the reason women vote for Trump is because they like want to feel safe and protected, and they were taught that following in line with this man, with men, keeps you safe and protected, and that will come at all costs. But now that we see people turning against their own, we're finding even them treated like the rest of marginalized folks have been forever. The Jack of Clubs doesn't need to entirely reject this, because I think when you reject awareness of that which impacts you, you also reject a part of yourself that's able to metabolize those things. And that often leads to a little bit more rash behavior. And, you know, that's not to say that all of these things aren't true. Again, dealing with, you know, women under patriarchy is very difficult. Very, very difficult. And femininity should not be seen as a threat because of desirability politics. But softness and tenderness can be seen as empowering, can be seen as the very tools of war that we need to be well equipped in, so that we do not get burnt out. And that's the lesson of this youthful Jack, is don't burn yourself out, don't misuse your fire. You know, I feel like in a real way this is like incel nofap versus like fuckboy kind of energy. Like both are the same. Both are misusing their energy and letting it be led or directed by one way or another. And again, you know, the jealous female energy for male attention kind of energy. Both are kind of jaded, and this is also what Pisces is reminding us to heal before we go acting out and acting a fool with our Aries energy. So I imagine we'll see more of both of those kind of energies. But I also imagine that perhaps we'll see some incredible transitions, because there are those of us that are seeding reality in dream and in meditation for a deeper understanding of self and a more expansive understanding of the roles in which we serve and the experiences in which we can have, and the exuberance of those experiences, the intensity of those experiences, without necessarily having to be just like all pedal to the metal, you know, all expanse, all time, no space kind of thing, which is still very much a masculine domineering and misdirection of energy. So fuck Pisces. Thanks for fucking letting us know that we've still got some healing to do deep beneath the surface and rooted into all things. Let's pull a spirit card, because that was quite expansive, and see what a bridge in the gap is. That's perfect. Interesting. Six of Cups, Queen of Cups. It is, like I've been saying all this time, the ways in which Pisces energies, and the stories told in the fluid flows through Aries, and our ability to hold and honor it. And by honor, you can also build with it. You can also build in it. Our emotions are not something that needs to be avoided. Again, femininity is not a threat. Emotions are not a threat. Not that emotions are inherently feminine, but it's very much how this structured society functions. And so the Six of Cups can be very balanced, can be very regenerative, like it's even flow throughout. There's even more flowers because there is an internal source and an internal rooting of flow that then is able to offer more of itself rather than feel burnt out, dry, dried up, lack of water resources, etc., etc. And in so many ways it is, yes, very literally applicable. But in what ways are we giving back? I also feel like there's, even in regards to AI and lack of water resources, there's a lot more of like kind of giving up and kind of just like, oh, well, AI isn't everything, so just get used to it. Instead of like, okay, well, if AI isn't everything, then how do we give back to the water? And then how do we give back to other resources? Like a Kosha browser uses a different kind of generator for AI so that it's not using data centers and it's not sucking up water. It's regenerating its own water sources and using it. And that is the way that we need to be internally and alchemically. And that is ultimately a very Queen of Cups move that knows how to rock with these waves and therefore knows how to direct the fire as well. Because ain't no scorching this woman. Ain't no scorching this mama. Ain't no scorching this kind of character and this kind of energy within us, because it wields our emotions like a superpower, not like an impulse to be numbed or an impulse to be, sedated or succumbed to, and not like insecurity or, withholding or jealousy or, lack of confidence or conviction. In fact, it moves and flows through. The confidence and conviction is the story woven throughout every molecule of water in this character. And even in that, the ways in which she moves from the water, the ways in which she's carrying the water, the ways in which things grow from the water and weave her in. She is a part of it. She is a part of it. And that is the ways in which we have to, maybe as a collective, accept the femininity in all of us. And the ways in which that is honoring our emotions, the capacity for space within us and not just barreling through these things. And without it being seen as a threat, without it being seen as less than, without it being seen as an offense or as an insult. And as a queer person, very much wrapping my head around that too, because it drives me crazy that having long hair, despite indigenous men having long hair, still makes people think she's so pretty, rather than the same exact queer personality and masculine dress and energy and role and responsibility that I've ever served in life. It's so funny to me, but it really, honestly, has not been something that topples this tower. It is just something that gives me a perspective about who is looking upon this tower or looking upon this stack. And I always say that, like, the ways in which people gender me tell me so much more about them and what they need than it will ever tell me about me. And that has been able to allow my masculinity to honor my femininity and allow my femininity to feel safe and guarded and honored by my masculinity. And we can all have that, just like we can all facilitate hydrogen bonds in our water, just like we can all be particle and waveform, just like we can all be as masculine or as femme as we want to, and also honor the regards to our whole self and not just a categorized, boxed in self. It's very funny. I was thinking about this earlier today too. It's like, embracing masculinity also gave me the confidence to embrace more femininity. But sometimes that's hard because the ways in which people receive femininity is whether or not it's desirable to them, which is rooted in misogyny and misandry rather than in honoring femininity. That's why I painted Mother Earth in this way, because everybody loves the hot Mother Earth, but nobody wants to fucking honor her, and she's sick of it. And quite honestly, though I feel very strong and masculine regardless of any feminine dress, like I always say too, men can wear skirts, gotta air the balls out. And also kilts, various other fucking very real examples. But when people see desirability, then it becomes a threat as to what resources are actually available to them. And then femininity becomes a threat. And that is difficult because I don't intend to be feminine or a threat. I am a threat, but not because I'm feminine. I'm a threat to the system, but not to other femmes. I don't even play that game. But we find ourselves at odds because we are still operating in proximity to the very systems that we are also struggling to get out from under of. And so liberate yourself, get out from under, and build your tower of emotion and of recognition and of memory and of story in a way that upholds you. And that comes with a lot of trauma healing in a very real way. Trauma being stored in the hips is a way in which we absorb impact, and a way in which we store memory and protect the integrity of that memory. And that is also why so many people have sciatica and weak bones and, issues with hip alignment and, what is it when lordosis of the spine, or, I don't know, the opposite of it, where your spine's, sort of accentuatedly curved. And it has an incredible amount to do with our fear or rejection of those energies because of patriarchy, because of misogyny, because of misandry. All in the same. Dark triad, yet again. Yet again. Oh my gosh. Okay. With that, I will leave you. Sit with it. Perhaps if this rang a bell for you, consider watching more of it. Let it ring a bell or two, because it is a cycle of harmonies, because we have all of these energies within us. And if you notice straight through, they influence each other. And so, as so many energies move into Aries, let's not forget about Pisces and the voyage that it's led. And as we move into, a more convicted understanding of ourself, that comes with understanding the totality of the self. And so maybe you don't have any planets in a certain sign. All the more reason to look there. Because if anything, that is a blind spot. That is a blind spot that is very important to the air that catches under that energy, or to the momentum of that energy, or to the direction of that energy, like a gust of wind carrying a paper plane. So consider that. And if you would like to have a direct transliteration of your own astrological chart, and the ways in which it translates into Telegi or Meshika astrology, then you can absolutely reach out if you go to mytotemodification.com. That is an option, as well as private and personal readings of the general variety or of a full body sort of rehash and recalibration variety, in which we can also use meditation to actualize on those things. Otherwise, please stick around, because new moons, full moons will always be a thing. There's often an integrative breath work that reoccurs with them. And if that is something that you find particularly interesting as you grow on this journey, then please check out the website and any in the circle actions offerings for meditation and breath work that we can do together for free, and just to seed the consciousness, the collective consciousness, and excavate our own internal unconscious. So, with that, party on. Love you. Keep kicking ass, taking names, breaking hearts. Maybe not the breaking hearts part, especially not your own. But yeah, I hope that helps clarify some energies and gives you some tools to utilize as we embark on this new astrological season. With that, wato, atanto, chiliquang, squista. And I will see you next time. Donata, koi.